The Carolina Hurricanes are the 2026 Stanley Cup champions. But Neil, as you well know from 32 years ago, even the Stanley Cup winner has plenty of work ahead of them.
Absolutely. And we won the Cup the same day as the Carolina Hurricanes, yet back in 1994, it was June 14th when we won the Cup. And yes, you have a lot of work to do, especially if you're the manager, because you come right out of concentrating on the finals, sweating it out, hoping your team can get there. They do get there. You go through a bunch of parties and parades and a lot of great stuff. And then it's nose to the grindstone because the draft is coming, free agency is coming. And while everybody else in the league has been tampering with guys that they think that they might want on July 1st, you haven't been able to have that luxury because you've been concentrating on trying to win that darn cup. I would imagine that's where the Carolina Hurricanes and the Vegas Golden Knights sit right now.
You couldn't wait to lobby that tampering hand grenade into the conversation, could you?
No, because I know it's true. And every GM that I talk to knows it's true and says you can't possibly keep up if you're not doing some of that.
Well, let's recap the 25-26 Carolina Hurricanes story that ended on top of the NHL mountain. They finished first in the Eastern Conference, second overall with 113 points. They got to the final in only 13 games, sweeping Ottawa and Philadelphia, beating Montreal in 5 before taking out Vegas in 6 to win the Stanley Cup. When we did our expectations back last summer, we knew that this still was a very good team and that they were going to contend for the Metropolitan Division. They had already had 7 straight trips to the playoffs, including 3 trips to the conference finals. But would this team be constructed by GM Eric Tulsky to take that final step? And entering the season, Nikolaj Ehlers and K'Andre Miller joined the team. We had thought that Ehlers was maybe a forward that was very similar to the types of forwards that they already had. They also lost Brent Burns and Dmitry Orlov on defense. And those questions about goaltending were still there because it was Frederik Andersen, Pyotr Kochetkov, and Cayden Primeau. And nowhere in our conversation last summer was Brandon Bussey, who was claimed off waivers from Florida on October 5th. So when we looked at the collective going in, this was certainly still a very strong playoff team, but not a championship team. What changed?
Well, I think you've already named the names that changed this thing. And by the way, you mentioned Cayden Primeau. I watched him play for the Chicago Wolves in the AHL playoffs. However, I think that as much as I hated to see Brent Burns go because I thought he was real good for Carolina and he ended up signing with Colorado, they did do a drastic upgrade in my mind when they brought in the big man K'Andre Miller because I thought he really improved under the tutelage of the Hurricanes. And Nikolaj Ehlers was spectacular in my mind for Carolina coming over from Winnipeg, first team other than Winnipeg that he'd ever played for. We always, and everybody did, basically doubt their goaltending with Frederik Andersen, who hadn't been able to do it in Toronto, hadn't been able to get the job completely done in Carolina. Pyotr Kochetkov was basically the second guy, maybe up and coming. And of course, Primeau, we didn't count in at all. The thing that we never saw, we couldn't have seen, it was impossible, was that Florida signed this young kid, Brandon Bussey, who had played in the Boston Bruins organization, never for the Bruins, and then to send him down to the minors to get him some playing time early in the season, actually before the season even started. They put him on waivers, which you have to do, and Carolina smartly claimed him and brought him in. And why did Carolina bring him in? They brought him in because Andersen and Kochetkov were both hurt to start the season. So in came Brandon Bussey, this unknown kid with the funny name Bussey. At that time, he was clearly the number 3 goalie on a 2-way contract that he had gotten himself in Florida. As you said, it was certainly a playoff team. I think our prediction was that they would win the Metro Division because we saw that they would be that strong. And by the way, on the error side, I thought that Jersey would be very strong. too, and they missed the playoffs. But we didn't see it as a Stanley Cup team. We didn't see it beating Colorado, Dallas, and at that time, Winnipeg, certainly. So, yes, I think the improvements that they made over the summer were just great. And there was some maturation process in their young players, the Stankovens, the Blakes. There was a fountain of youth injected into Taylor Hall at some point. He ended up in the movie Cocoon because he played like he did as a rookie in Edmonton. And I think that's what changed it.
When we went back and we did our preview, the start of the season with Jeff Marek, he had said, nobody shines up defensemen more than the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think we saw that with Miller's play. Bussey responds with a 31-6-2 record and a 2.47 goals against average. So right away, we were on this bandwagon of saying, you know what, this looks like there's something different here, and we'll get into the playoffs a little bit later on. But you can see certain components of this team starting to come together. The reality of their season, they were 14 points better than they were in 24-25, but they were 17 points better on the road. They went from 5 games under to 12 games over. Their goal scoring per game went from 9th to 2nd, only behind Colorado, and their goals against average went from 10th, using 5 goaltenders last season, to 5th using the 3 that we've already mentioned. And interestingly, Neil, Frederik Andersen didn't carry the load in either season because Pyotr Kochetkov had most of the play in 24-25 and the aforementioned Bussey this past season.
Brandon Bussey was their savior, in my mind. He was their savior. I mean, yes, Freddie Andersen played well for them, sweeps in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, but then did what Freddie Andersen always does. He got hurt. And that forced them to put the young kid, Brandon Bussey, in the net, and they've never looked smarter.
I think one of the things also was their scoring. You talked about the maturation process, and a year ago, they only had 2 players in their lineup with 50 or more points and only 1 player with 30 goals. That was Seth Jarvis. This season, 6 players with at least 50 points, and Jarvis and Andrei Svechnikov reaching 30. But once you got to the playoffs, 9 players had at least 10 points, and that collective defense that they played to protect Andersen and then later on Bussey really proved to be the difference, because they gave up only 5 goals against Ottawa, only 5 against Philly. In the last 4 games that they won against Montreal, only gave up 5 goals. And then once they were down 2-1 in the final against Vegas, only gave up 5 goals in the last 3 games. So you can see where the totality of this effort truly put them on top, even though they did not have a true offensive game breaker.
Absolutely. They didn't have that superstar. They didn't have that Nate McKinnon, if you want to just single out a guy, or a Nikita Kucherov. They don't have that. But what they had was a well-rounded, complete team. It showed in all of the rounds of the playoffs.
I thought also was interesting was a lot of attention was given to that first line of Jarvis, Sebastian Aho, and Svechnikov. But it was really that second line throughout the playoffs of Jackson Blake, Taylor Hall, and Logan Stankoven that stepped forward. And boy, how good does that Stankoven deal look now? Because not only did Carolina get him from Dallas, they also got 4 draft picks for Mikko Rantanen.
Incredible. And Stankoven certainly introduced himself to the league this year and let everybody know he was there. And I love what Ray Ferraro said about Stankoven. Stankoven may be short, but he's not small.
And played big throughout the playoffs. And then, you throw in some of the fourth line, the depth forwards, such as Eric Robinson and Mark Jankowski. And boy, this team looks ready to go for a repeat. And we're going to spell out why in just a second.
Yeah, and don't forget Jordan Staal, who won the Conn Smythe Trophy, the captain of the team, won the Cup 17 years earlier with the Pittsburgh Penguins. was phenomenal in the playoffs and a great leader. We've always known he was a great leader. He's been a great captain for the Carolina Hurricanes, but boy, he really showed up in the playoffs. And when you've got that kind of scoring coming from your third line, and then that same guy wins every faceoff he takes, I mean, it's hard to beat that team. The only way you're going to beat them is if they don't have the goaltending. And then all of a sudden, this kid Bussey shows up, and now they got the goaltending.
Let's take a look ahead at the work that Eric Tulsky has and the kind of lineup that he will set forth for Rod Brind'Amour, 26-27. Team only has 4 picks in the upcoming draft, none in the second round, and that pick was gone as part of the acquisition of K'Andre Miller from the New York Rangers. They had none in the third round. Now, that was part of the original acquisition of Shane Gostisbehere from Arizona in March of 2023. But you got to remember also that Gostisbehere actually left in the summer of that year to sign with Detroit before returning to Carolina as a UFA a year later. They have none in the fifth round. That was the acquisition of Mark Jankowski from Nashville at the deadline in 2025. They also have no picks in the seventh round. That was the acquisition of Cayden Primeau from Montreal in June of 2025. But they do have 2 picks in round number 6, their own and that of the Toronto Maple Leafs. They have just under $12 million in projected cap space. But here's where it really starts to work in their favor. Their UFAs, Nick Deslauriers, who was acquired from the Philadelphia Flyers, really didn't play very much during the playoffs. Mike Riley also played sporadically, and Frederik Andersen. So in terms of UFA maintenance, you don't got a lot going on here, and your lone RFA is defenseman Alexander Nikishin.
Right. And so they're going to keep Nikishin, obviously. He's a restricted free agent. They'll work out a deal there. They'll decide whether they want Mike Riley back. He didn't play a whole heck of a lot in the playoffs. Frederik Andersen, unless he wants a huge raise, he wants to move on somewhere else to make more money. We'll have to see on that one. And Nick Deslauriers was a deterrent for the Carolina Hurricanes during the playoffs when they got him from Philadelphia, so that if Ottawa or whoever else they faced wanted to go nuclear on them, they had somebody to go back at them. And that's why he was there. I would doubt that they would re-sign him, but there's not a whole heck of a lot of work here like there is on some of the teams that we've reviewed.
You look forward to 26-27. This team is going to be largely intact. Next year, Captain Staal, Jordan Martinook, Gostisbehere, Jalen Chatfield, and Kochetkov are all UFAs. But long term, they've got 9 players signed through 29-30 and 7 through 2030-2031. I think it's early to start dynasty talk, but you look at the way that this team is locked up, and with the salary cap going up, Tulsky is certainly going to be able to fill in some blanks here as we get towards the end of the decade.
I think for 26-27, if everything goes right for the Hurricanes, and by that I mean that they don't get major injuries, they don't get, for some reason, somebody falling off the face of the earth, they do have a chance to repeat. The problem that they're going to face is if something happens that we can't anticipate, an injury to Sebastian Aho, an injury to Jacob Slavin, an injury to Brandon Bussey, that will really get in their way because they don't have, again, I'll go back to the superstars of the league, the Kucherovs and the McKinnons and the Makars, and they don't have those guys. They've got a lot of, let's call them good AA players. They probably got more than anybody, but they really don't have that AAA guy, which is fine because when you put your whole lineup full of AAs, you got enough there to win, as we saw them do this year.
In the end game, they were very healthy throughout these playoffs. They got a great draw in terms of their opponents right up until the Stanley Cup Final. Got a little bit of luck probably in that fourth game when it was tied at 3 and Jack Eichel hit a post, and who knows, if that goes in and Vegas holds the lead, then maybe it ends up as a 3-1 Vegas lead going into Game 5. But, of course, that did not happen, and most of all, they played well throughout these playoffs. This was a total team effort, and kudos to them for just a great job throughout this 2-month marathon.
No doubt about that. I mean, they were first in the East. They swept, and they should have been sending thank you cards to the Vegas Golden Knights, the team that they beat in the final, for having swept Colorado, because I'm not so sure that if Colorado had been healthy and gotten all the way to the final and you would have had a best from the West versus best from the East, that would have been a pretty formidable foe for the Carolina Hurricanes, but they weren't there. And Rod Brind'Amour and his players took care of everybody they faced.